Hello, my name is Jane Cook, and I chose option 2 for Module 3 Critical Thinking assignment, which is Health Information Exchange. So a little introduction. So Health Information Exchange, which I'll refer to as HIE for the rest of the presentation, can be somewhat of a challenging concept to define, as it isn't as tangible as something like an electronic health record, which we're all pretty familiar with. According to the Office of the National Coordinator for Health Information Technology, ONC, the goal of HIE is to improve the speed, quality, safety, and cost of patient care. Simplistically, it can be described as the give and take of health information. There are 3 types of HIE. The first is a directed exchange, which is the ability to exchange health information amongst providers to better coordinate a patient's care. Query-based exchange comes into play in settings that may be unanticipated, like a patient entering an emergency room. Query-based exchanges describe the ability for providers to find or request information from other providers. Finally, there's consumer-mediated exchange, which is the ability for patients to input and control the use of their own health information. HIE is not a new concept, but there has been emphasis on it since the HITECH Act in 2009. Current data shows that the top providers of health information are hospitals and ambulatory settings, while the top receivers of health information are also ambulatory settings, hospitals, but additionally public health departments and payers. A recent review of the most current studies of HIE systems found that all reported positive outcomes, including less duplicate testing, lower cost, improved patient safety, and reduced imaging. Community HIEs were also found to have more positive outcomes reported compared to system HIEs, which further supports the capability and benefit of a truly interoperable HIE. HIE can be impactful in any setting. It can certainly provide important information in a critical situation, but it can also help providers collaborate for management of chronic disease. A simple example is the record of a patient allergy. The knowledge of a patient allergy, particularly a drug allergy, can be life-altering in an emergent situation. If a patient arrives to a hospital needing urgent care, incapable of reviewing personal allergies, this information should be able to be accessed via an HIE. This simple example illustrates increase in patient safety, more accurate diagnoses and course of action, and a cost savings from avoiding a potential dangerous allergic reaction. A capability that should not be overlooked is the increase in patient engagement. Patients who were engaged with their medical record reported receiving higher quality healthcare while also reporting lower costs and decreased medical errors. Additional studies show improved health outcomes, medical adherence, and lower rates of hospital admission in engaged patients. General expectations and standards for HIE have stemmed from the HITECH Act, which defines stages of meaningful use. It has been challenging to even advance from stage 1 with the interoperability challenges that have occurred. Specific standards for HIE are created by HL7, which is a nonprofit organization, accredited standards developing organization. HL7 defines how information is captured, packaged, and shared from one party to another to provide seamless integration. HL7 standards are currently the most adopted in the world. Essentially, HL7 allows different medical records, different institutions, to all be speaking the same language. So it essentially is a translator for all the medical records. The Sequoia Project is a nonprofit organization that has managed the HIE for the federal government, ONC, since 2012. The vision of the organization is to make the right health information accessible at the right place and time to improve the health and welfare of all Americans. One of the initiatives of Sequoia that aligns with HIE goals of the country is PULSE, which stands for Patient Unified Lookup System for Emergencies. This is a nationwide IT platform to be able to query patient information from all connected organizations. Disaster situations illustrate the need for interoperability, as people are often displaced from normal geographical locations, may not have any records accessible, and need acute and chronic medical care. Considering one of the primary goals of HIE is to promote interoperability, it is alarming that one of the most dominant challenges is information blocking from EHR vendors or health systems and providers. In one study, 50% of respondents said that EHR vendors routinely engage in information blocking, while 25% of hospitals routinely engage in information blocking. Another study that supports the current challenges found that hospitals that use the dominant EHR vendor in the marketplace have an increase in HIE activities. This shows how blocking can occur indirectly or directly. Fortunately, regulations are being put in place to combat some of the challenges with meaningful use of EHRs. The Trusted Exchange Framework and Common Agreement will focus on standardization, transparency, cooperation, privacy, access, and population-level data. So in terms of participation barriers, some of the latest research has shown that participation in HIE has actually declined from 2012 to 2014 by, not significantly, but there is some decline. One of the more interesting barriers to participation are the perceived and real legal barriers. So an example of this is HIPAA, which was a perceived barrier to adopting HIE. So providers were uncertain of sharing medical information electronically and the liability of any privacy breaches by the recipient. Another similar barrier as it relates to privacy is patient consent. A barrier that cannot be ignored and is likely the most significant is the financial impact of HIEs. Ultimately, financial incentives from regulations or grants are not sustainable. There needs to be sustainable financial benefits from HIE adoption. So to further improve HIE in the US, the most crucial change needed is that vendors and competitors have to support interoperability. A simplistic comparison is that of email platforms such as Outlook, Gmail, Yahoo, etc. It would be ludicrous if users could not communicate to others using a different email platform. Similarly, there are different operating systems such as Mac OS and Android, yet the cell phone devices can share communication seamlessly. In the case of email and cell phones, it could be argued that the customer expected and demanded interoperability. In healthcare, interoperability wasn't expected from the largest group of stakeholders, the patients, mainly because a low health literacy rate. The importance of interoperability remains predominantly within the industry of healthcare providers. A great example of how aligned goals can improve HIE is in California, where a group of hospitals mutually signed a policy supporting querying for information. This led to an increase of 1,349% in exchanges of clinical summaries. Considering the largest stakeholders are the patients, one recommendation is the use of personal health records, PHRs. This would shift the data storage to an individual patient-based model, like on a cell phone or a personal computer device. This would certainly increase engagement from patients with health information, but brings to light other concerns such as accuracy of the information if driven from the patient. Finally, changes in reimbursement typically spur changes rapidly. If CMS determined that participation in HIE was mandatory for reimbursement, swift action would likely occur. There are definitions for what meaningful use is, but no specific measures to achieve meaningful use. There needs to be stricter guidelines to continue to make progress. In conclusion, at this point in the HIE movement, there are really two possible paths to achieving true interoperability across the country. First, HIE will continue to be viewed as a public good, and further policies, regulations, and reimbursement will ensue to keep progressing. This could be identified as the proactive approach to HIE. Alternatively, there is some research that shows that disruptors like a public health crisis or a natural disaster could really propel HIE in the US. Unfortunately, this would be a reactive approach, but one that would increase the population and the patient as the greatest stakeholder in HIE advancement.